Welcome to the Cheating Wife Stories channel. We had nothing, you said. We had nothing at all. That's the first thing that hammered into my chest. The first echo I heard after your lips closed. You stood there, Laura Carter, calm as the day, not even looking my way. You were turned slightly to the side, almost as if you feared looking me in the eye would betray the truth. And I remember thinking, nothing. Is that what you call the late-night phone calls I heard you whispering? The scent of cologne on your blouse that didn't belong to me? The glimmer in your eyes when his name lit up on your phone? I wanted to laugh at the absurdity of it all. Or cry. Maybe. But at that moment, I was beyond tears. My voice came out rough, edged in gravel, yet I kept speaking. Kept asking you questions, pushing for details. And every time I pressed, you answered with that same tight-lipped smile, unwavering. David, you're reading too much into things. We had nothing. Just business, you know. I told you, it was a work thing. Your eyes would flicker, but never settle on me. My heart hammered with a slow, punishing thud. I could feel the tension in my own voice, could hear it crack. But I wouldn't stop, because the pieces had begun to form a puzzle. The crumpled insurance policy with 2 children's names, children who weren't mine, listed as beneficiaries, the funeral of your older sister in Kansas City, where I stood in the back row and heard you introduce a gaunt man in a dark suit as the only man I've ever loved, and me, David Carter, your husband, was left behind like a meaningless shadow. I can't forget the sympathetic glances from those who happened to look back that day, either out of shock or pity. I felt a searing heat in my cheeks. Humiliation boiled in my gut, but I choked it down. I swallowed it all. Because I was still trying to figure out why, and how, and what we had become. Nothing, you said. As if that single word could wipe out the nights you stayed out late, the suspicious texts, the dinners you never quite explained. As if it could erase the day I found you in our bedroom, the door half open, your hair askew, your blouse unbuttoned lower than usual, and a man's coat draped over the back of the chair. I remember the pressure in the air, the pulse in my ears, the smell of sweat and perfume mixing in a heady swirl of betrayal. Just business. Yes, that's how you explained it to me later. Like a mantra. Like a battered phrase designed to silence any further questioning. I swallowed. Took a breath. Something in my chest tightened and refused to let go. Yet I forced myself to keep talking, keep confronting. Laura Carter, I said, my voice trembling, look at me. You turned at last, eyes skittering across my face, then off to the side again. Tell me the truth, I repeated, almost a plea, almost a demand. That's when you uttered the lie one more time, so casual it felt rehearsed. David, I already told you everything. We had nothing. The dryness in your tone, the absolute lack of remorse, stung me in ways I never expected. I reached for a glass of water on the kitchen table, nearly knocking it over with my shaking hand. My breath came in shallow spurts, as if my body forgot how to breathe right. Nothing. My mind roared with 1,000 images, 1,000 what-ifs. So that's how easily she dismisses it. For a long moment, I stood there, letting silence pool between us. Outside, a lawnmower droned in the distance, strangely ordinary. Inside, my life was falling apart. I remember the day I found that insurance policy. It was lying in the hallway near your purse. At first, I thought it was some addendum we'd added to our joint account. Maybe health insurance forms or some new coverage for the house. Then I saw the names, typed in neat, clinical letters. 2 children, both with the same last name, Reyes. No mention of me. Under relationship, it stated beneficiaries, plain as day. And your own name as the primary insured. That's when it clicked that we'd traveled well beyond flirtation or emotional disconnection. This was a separate life, a separate plan, one that didn't include me. Even the concept of shared finances, once our normal routine, turned into a twisted labyrinth of lies. I couldn't breathe for several seconds. I recall clutching the edges of the paper until it crumpled. The hallway blurred. My throat tightened. I went outside to catch a breath of fresh air, to steady my shaking hands. But the shock was there. It was unstoppable. And yet here you were, telling me there was nothing, telling me that I was imagining it all. Even after you stood at your sister's funeral and called that gaunt stranger the only man you ever loved, I can still see it. The coffin at the front of the chapel, the hush of the mourners, the musty smell of old flowers. I was in the back row, my heart pounding so loudly I felt sure everyone could hear it. You spoke so gently at first, talking about your sister, your family, the shared childhood you'd mentioned to me in passing. Then, without warning, you introduced him. Alan Reyes. My man, my one and only. I remember the crowd's murmurs, the quick flick of heads. People glanced at me. No one said a word out loud, but I felt the question in the air. Aren't you her husband? I wanted to storm out, to rage right there in front of everyone, but my body locked up. My anger, my humiliation, everything bottled, swirling inside. And when the service ended, you walked off with him, arms linked, as if I didn't exist. I followed at a distance, my hands clenched into fists, my teeth grinding. But I stayed silent, too stunned and ashamed to act. The entire drive back to our hotel was a blur. I kept hearing your sister's eulogy, your voice praising Alan's virtues. He's been my rock, you said. My fingers gripped the steering wheel so hard my knuckles whitened. Once at the hotel, you told me you were exhausted, you needed to sleep. But I had so many questions, none of which you answered that night. I kept telling myself there had to be a logical explanation, that maybe you were in shock from your sister's death, that you'd said something impulsive. But then I found that Dan Policy, the one with his children's names. I found dinner receipts for reservations you claimed were business meetings, and I found the text messages, hidden away under a disguised contact name in your phone. Company HR. Only it wasn't HR. It was him. That's how I knew for sure. Not that it made the betrayal any easier to digest. Quite the opposite. Each discovery twisted the knife deeper, leaving me raw and desperate for answers. Now, back in our kitchen, you just insisted there was nothing. We had nothing. And I stood there, shoulders tense, cold fury building in my gut. My voice nearly cracked, but I managed to speak with a strange, eerie calm. Do you love him, Laura Carter? Yes or no? You looked at me, your pupils shrinking, lips pressed together. A beat of silence. Then you spoke. Don't ask me questions you don't want answered. And that was it. I'd never felt so hollow. That night, after you'd gone to bed, separate from me, physically and emotionally, I paced the living room, replaying every moment of our marriage. I remembered the early days in Austin, back when we struggled to pay rent on our tiny apartment, when we celebrated my new job offer with cheap wine and microwaved lasagna. I remembered how proud you were of your master's in accounting, how I stood in the audience and clapped for you when you walked across the stage. I remembered how we dreamed of starting a family one day, how we picked out names, silly, affectionate brainstorming sessions that felt so genuine, so us. And now, this. I stared at the photos on the shelf, pictures of us smiling at Lake Michigan, hutting in front of the Bean in downtown Chicago. They all felt like relics from another lifetime, mocking me from behind their polished glass frames. I wanted to tear them all down. Instead, I gritted my teeth and tried to figure out where everything had gone wrong. Days passed, and I thought about confrontation. But each time I asked a direct question, your eyes slid away, and you'd sigh in annoyance, as if I were the one causing trouble. David, let's not do this now, you'd say, hugging your elbows and turning away. Then you'd slip out the door with your laptop bag, claiming you had errands or an urgent meeting, leaving me behind to stew, half crazy with doubt. I wasn't sleeping. I wasn't eating much. My colleagues at the office noticed my erratic behavior. One day, my manager asked if everything was okay at home. I lied. I told him we were fine. But we weren't. We were far from fine. One night, I arrived home early from work. The house was quiet, lights off, and I noticed your car missing. A weird chill ran through my body. Normally, I'd text you or call, but a dark impulse pushed me to remain silent. I set my briefcase down gently, my heart thrumming. She's not here, so where is she? And with whom? I checked the bedroom. Nothing. Then, curiosity or desperation took over. I opened your closet, rummaged through drawers. Something inside me wanted tangible proof. I needed to see something that would confirm my worst suspicions or, paradoxically, prove me wrong. I found lingerie tucked behind your usual underwear, sets I'd never seen you wear for me. I found receipts from an upscale boutique downtown, dated months back. My pulse hammered. She never wore that at home. So, who was it for? Time blurred. Eventually, I heard your footsteps outside. I closed the drawer, hurried back to the living room, pretended to be engrossed in the TV. You walked in, flicked on the light, saw me on the couch. You froze for half a second, just enough for me to spot the flicker of surprise or guilt in your eyes. You smelled different, like a perfume you typically reserve for special occasions. Your hair was slightly tousled, the top button of your blouse undone, revealing a hint of lace. You shifted your bag on your shoulder, clearing your throat as if to speak. But I didn't let you. I stood abruptly. Where have you been? The question came out sharp. You blinked, bristling at my tone. Work, you said. We had a late meeting. I walked toward you, bridging the distance in a few steps. Don't lie to me, Laura Carter, I said, voice trembling with a mixture of hurt and anger. I know. I found the insurance policy. I know about Alan Reyes. So stop lying. My voice rose on that last word, loud enough to echo in the hallway. You clutched your bag, lips parting, searching for an excuse, but none came. Suddenly, I was close enough to smell a faint trace of men's cologne, the kind I never wear. My stomach twisted in revulsion. Something in my eyes must have shown how deeply I was wounded, because you took a step back, exhaling softly. And then, in a small voice, you said, David, it's not what you think. Really? But I couldn't believe you. Not anymore. That was the night I pressed you until you finally snapped back at me, words cutting like shards of broken glass. David, you're not the man I thought I'd married. You never gave me the attention I deserved. Alan understands me. He sees me for who I really am. The betrayal and heartbreak that had been boiling inside me exploded in raw, ragged anger, my fist clenched at my side. I wanted to throw something, break something, anything to release the torment, but I kept my composure, or at least some fragmented version of it. My voice quivered as I asked, So you love him? You stared at me, tears forming but not falling. I don't know, you whispered. It just happened. Your admission felt like someone punched a hole in my chest. And then, just like that, you brushed past me, locked yourself in the bedroom. I stood there in the hallway, the hum of the air conditioner a faint background static. I thought, this is it. This is really happening. Our marriage was unraveling before my eyes. But it was only after your sister's funeral that everything completely shattered. That funeral, it should have been a moment to grieve for your sister, to honor her memory. Instead, it became the stage for the grand reveal of your other life, the one you shared with Alan Reyes. My only man, you called him. I was in the back row, stunned, ears ringing. You didn't even look at me once. Not once. People turned around, some recognized me, some whispered behind their programs. I wanted to burst from my seat, to shout that you were lying, to show them our wedding ring, the pictures, the years we'd shared, but I couldn't muster the words. After the service, I found a quiet corner in the corridor, pressing my hands against the cold marble wall. My head spun. Everything tasted bitter. The anger, the shame, the heartbreak. I felt it all at once. Then I heard footsteps. I turned, expecting maybe a distant relative or a concerned friend. But it was him, Alan Reyes. He looked me straight in the eyes, face expressionless. He wore a black suit, well-tailored. His posture exuded a calm confidence that infuriated me. For a moment, we just stared at each other. Then he quietly said, "I'm sorry for your loss. I'm sorry this is how you found out." The audacity of it nearly pushed me over the edge. I half laughed, half choked. "You're sorry," I repeated, my voice cracking. He nodded, as though practicing some damned empathy. "I never wanted it to come out like this. Laura, she's going through a lot right now." My heart pounded, my fists clenched. But my voice, hoarse with contained rage, still managed to force its way out. "You have no right at all, to talk to me about Laura Carter, or about what she's going through." He pressed his lips together, said nothing further. Finally, he pivoted on his heel, and left me standing alone. In the wake of that funeral, my world changed forever. We rode home in separate cars, me in the old sedan we'd shared for years, you with him in his sleek black vehicle. I stared at you through the windshield, saw the way your head leaned against the passenger window. Eyes red, but not for me. My hands squeezed the steering wheel so tightly that the bones in my fingers ached. I couldn't sleep that night. All I kept hearing was you calling him your only man, over and over, like a curse that wouldn't stop replaying in my head. By morning, I realized something fundamental about myself had shifted. I wasn't going to beg. I wasn't going to plead. I wasn't going to drown in self-pity. If anything, the betrayal hardened me, lit a spark of anger and clarity that I didn't know I possessed. You had ended any illusions I had about our marriage, and in that ending, you gave me something new. Purpose. A cold purpose, yes, but purpose all the same. So the next day, I went to the attorney's office. I didn't tell you. I simply made an appointment, sat down with a stern-faced lawyer in a sterile conference room, and started the paperwork for divorce. I was numb, disconnected, but determined. I explained the situation as calmly as I could. The betrayal, the funeral, the separate insurance policy with Alan's children. The lawyer nodded, took notes, asked a few clarifying questions. Then she slid the documents across the table. "Take your time," she said quietly. "Sign when you're ready." My hand shook a little as I gripped the pen, but I signed. No theatrics, no speeches, just ink on paper. It felt final, but also strangely liberating, like unshackling a heavy chain from my ankles. When I got home, the house was empty. I discovered a note on the kitchen counter in your handwriting. Went out for a while. Need some air. The dryness of it almost made me laugh. So that was it. No apology, no attempt at a conversation. Just a note. I stared at the words, then crumpled the paper in my fist. I realized then that I was done. Done trying to understand you. Done chasing a reconciliation you clearly didn't want. I started packing. Not with the urgency of someone fleeing, but with the deliberate finality of a man who knows he's leaving for good. I pulled out a suitcase, placed some clothes inside, leaving room for a few essentials. Old birthday cards, photographs. Those I tucked away in a shoebox. Our shared memories, which once mattered so much, now felt like artifacts from a life that no longer existed. I just finished zipping up the suitcase when you returned. The moment you spotted the luggage, your eyes flickered with something akin to surprise. "David," you said, your voice uncertain for the first time in days, "where are you going?" I looked at you, taking in every detail, your posture, your expression, the faint lines of stress around your eyes. "I'm leaving," I said, my tone flat. I signed the divorce papers. The way your lips parted, as though you'd just taken a sudden blow to the gut, was almost satisfying. Almost. You inhaled sharply. "You're overreacting," you whispered. The cruelty of that statement made me laugh, a hollow sound that echoed in our too-quiet living room. "Overreacting," I repeated. "Sure. If that's how you want to see it. You didn't try to stop me. You didn't beg for a second chance. You just watched me drag my suitcase to the door. And when I looked back for the last time, I saw you standing there, arms folded, jaw set, tears shining in your eyes but not falling. That was the final image of you in that house, a woman who'd made her choices, who'd said her piece. I found a small furnished rental on the other side of town. It wasn't anything fancy, just a one-bedroom with peeling paint in the hallway. But it gave me the solitude I needed. I spent the first few nights staring at the ceiling, trying to figure out who I was without you. Part of me felt homeless, uprooted. Another part felt oddly free, as though the weight of our failing marriage had been lifted. Days turned into weeks. I handled the paperwork, the finances. You and I exchanged a few cold texts about dividing assets, but mostly it was done through lawyers. In the meantime, I visited a photographer friend of mine, just to talk at first. But then, on a whim, I asked if he'd do a personal shoot for me. Something to mark the change in my life, to capture the moment I stepped away from the lies and betrayal. It was an impulsive idea, but I felt compelled to do it. I showed up at his studio wearing an old leather jacket you always hated, said it made me look like a washed-up biker. The photographer set up the lights, told me to stand against a gray backdrop. The camera flash popped, momentarily blinding me. And in that flash, I felt something unexpected. A surge of vitality. The anger, hurt, and betrayal I'd carried began to transform into a sharpened sense of identity. I was still me, David Carter. And you were still you, Laura Carter, with your half-truths and your secrets. For better or worse, we were now separate entities. The final photos surprised me. I saw a slight smile on my face, an expression I barely recognized, half defiance, half relief. It was real. My eyes had a glint of hardened resolve, like a man who'd been through the fire and come out altered. When I held one of the prints in my hands, I realized that in some twisted way, I owed you a strange kind of thanks. You burned me, deceived me, but your betrayal forced me to confront who I was beneath the polite facade of a good husband. Yet closure wasn't so simple, because the memory of you calling Alan Reyes my only man haunted me. I couldn't shake it. It felt like an affront, an open wound that refused to scab over. In quiet moments, I fantasized about confronting him, making him pay. But I didn't want to stoop to violence, and I wasn't sure how to inflict any real damage beyond the realm of physical confrontation. Yet something in me craved the finality of revenge, the satisfaction of seeing him broken like he'd broken me. And so, the seeds of my plan began to form. They started off hazy, fragmented ideas I'd push aside whenever my conscience prickled. But the more I thought about Alan's arrogance, his calm stare at the funeral, and the dismissive way you both treated me, the more a dark desire coiled in my gut. I wanted to see him crumble. I wanted him to lose what he cherished most. But I had no idea how I could accomplish that without risking my own freedom, my own moral code. I'm not a violent man, I told myself, but I can't let this stand. It started innocently enough. A bit of online research. I learned he was a creative director at a boutique advertising agency, the kind that thrives on reputation and networking. I read up on his campaigns, his professional accolades. Then I discovered something intriguing. The agency was going through a financial rough patch. Their biggest client had just pulled out due to budget cuts, leaving them vulnerable. I thought, what if I exploit that somehow? I dug deeper, found a few leads on potential business deals. They were trying to line up. By day, I worked my normal job as a financial advisor, keeping up my usual facade. By night, I scored forums, local business pages, investor rumor mills, anything that might give me a clue about how to cripple his professional standing. It was methodical, fueled by a quiet fury. I knew it was a slippery slope, but I justified it. He destroyed my marriage, humiliated me in front of everyone I knew. Why shouldn't he face consequences? Weeks turned into a month, and my plan took shape. I discovered a potential investor who was rumored to be considering a partnership with Alan's firm, a big fish that could lift them out of their slump. So I made some calls in my capacity as a financial advisor, posed some subtle questions, planted a few well-chosen doubts about the viability of Alan's agency. Nothing overt, just gentle misgivings that I knew would sprout into full-blown distrust if nurtured properly. I told myself it wasn't illegal. I was simply sharing market insights. At the same time, I began to frequent local networking events, places where these investors, creative directors, and startup founders gathered. I acted casual, wore my best suits, put on my friendliest smile. Slowly, carefully, I positioned myself so that when Alan's name came up, I could sow seeds of skepticism. He's talented, I'd say, but I've heard troubling rumors about the agency's stability. Then I'd shrug, as if I had no personal stake. Just something to keep in mind. Sure enough, word spread. Investors are skittish creatures. They can't afford to ignore even a hint of trouble. The next thing I knew, deals were stalled, prospective partnerships delayed. Alan's agency was caught in a web of uncertainty, and through it all, I stayed on the sidelines, watching with cold satisfaction as their chances of rescue slipped away. During this period, I found out from mutual acquaintances that you and Alan had moved in together. A downtown apartment, all modern glass and steel. A perfect reflection of your new life. The news hurt, of course. Imagining you both playing house in some swanky high-rise stung like acid on an open wound. But it also fed my resolve. I thought, good, let them have their illusions. Meanwhile, I was making slow but sure progress on my quiet vendetta. Then came the night I crossed paths with Alan face to face for the second time since the funeral. It was at a business mixer in a hotel ballroom. The kind I regularly attend for professional reasons. I didn't expect him to show up, but there he was, leaning against the bar, swirling a glass of whiskey. For a moment, I considered turning around and leaving. But something, call it pride or the thirst for confrontation, kept me rooted. I moved across the room, navigating clusters of people in tailored suits, and took up a spot beside him, ordering a drink. He noticed me immediately. A flicker of recognition crossed his face, and he shifted. "David," he said quietly, just loud enough for me to hear over the soft murmur of conversation and clinking glasses. I nodded. I could feel my jaw clench. "Alan." An uneasy silence settled, charged with unspoken tension. Then he exhaled. "I heard about the divorce," he said, not looking at me directly. I gave a half chuckle, sipping my drink. "I'm sure Laura Carter told you," I replied. He didn't rise to the bait, just stirred his whiskey with a slow rotation of his wrist. "Look," he said, "I never intended for things to unfold like this. Life gets complicated, and—" I turned to him, my eyes hard. "Save it," I cut in. "Don't pretend you care." He swallowed, set his glass down. "I care about Laura. I do. And as much as this pains you to hear, I didn't want to hurt you. But sometimes relationships end for a reason." I felt my pulse spike. My voice trembled with suppressed rage. "Relationships end, sure. But not with the lies and the humiliation you both dished out. That was a choice." He opened his mouth, but I held up a hand. "Actually, don't bother," I said. "I've got nothing else to say to you." And I walked away, leaving him standing there. My hand shook slightly, adrenaline rushing through my veins. The nerve of him, trying to justify it all with a shrug and a whiskey, but it was fine. He had no idea what I was doing behind the scenes, and that gave me a grim sort of satisfaction. Over the next few weeks, my plan reached its crescendo. I strategically fed more doubts about Alan's agency into the right circles, even tipping off a local journalist to investigate their finances. Again, nothing I did was illegal, just well-placed comments that guided attention to potential red flags. The effect was immediate. The journalist sniffed around, discovered some questionable tax filings, which might have been sloppy paperwork, but it looked suspicious in print. And soon an article appeared online casting serious doubts about the agency's stability. The timing was devastating for Ellen. Potential clients pulled out. The big investor walked away entirely. Word got back to me that Alan was in damage control mode, working late hours to salvage the firm's reputation. I pictured him in his sleek office, tie loosened, forehead creased in worry. I pictured you, Laura Carter, coming home to him, seeing him stressed, trying to reassure him while you both scrambled to contain the fallout. And in my imagination, I laughed. Poetic justice, I told myself. But there was one final piece I hadn't accounted for, the raw, personal confrontation that inevitably comes when the wounded parties meet. It happened by chance, on a rainy Wednesday evening outside a coffee shop near my rental apartment. I'd just finished a meeting with a client, deciding to stop for a quick espresso. As I emerged onto the wet sidewalk, I spotted you standing under the awning, fiddling with your phone. For a split second, I considered ducking back inside. But you lifted your head, and our eyes locked. We stood a few feet apart, the rain drumming on the pavement. You were in a trim black coat, hair slicked back, eyeliner smudged from the dampness. Your expression was a mix of guilt, sadness, and anger. I cleared my throat. Laura Carter, I said, more to acknowledge your presence than to start a conversation. You took a step closer. I could smell your perfume, something floral and sharp. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then you broke the silence. David, you said in a shaky voice, "Can we talk?" I shrugged, glancing at the rain. Looks like we're stuck here anyway. We ended up stepping inside the coffee shop, where the warm aroma of roasted beans clashed with the tension between us. We found a small table in the corner. You sat across from me, your eyes darting around the room as if you were afraid to meet my gaze. I waited. Finally, you said, "I wanted to say I'm sorry. I know it's late, but I am." My heart pounded. I kept my voice low. "Sorry for which part?" You swallowed, pressed your lips together. All of it. The lies. The secrecy. The way you found out. I stared at you, searching for any sign of sincerity. Was there remorse, or just regret that the situation blew up so badly? I leaned forward, elbows on the table. "And Alan Reyes? Are you sorry for that?" Your eyes flicked away. I did what I felt I had to do. He made me feel alive. Understood. You trailed off, noticing the anger flaring in my expression. "Look, I know it sounds selfish. Maybe it is. But can you tell me you were truly happy? We barely spent time together anymore. We drifted." My voice dropped to a whisper. "You broke us, Laura Carter." "The drifting didn't break us. You did." You flinched as if slapped. "I know," you said quietly. "I just wanted something else." Silence. The hum of conversations around us pressed in. I wanted to lash out, to tell you how deeply you'd wounded me. But I found my anger had turned into a cold acceptance. I shook my head. "I don't know what you want me to say. We're done." I paused. I already signed the papers. You clasped your hands together. Your wedding band was gone, replaced by a simple ring I didn't recognize. "I heard," you murmured. "I'm moving in fully with Alan." My stomach tightened, but I just gave a small nod. "I'm not surprised." The beat passed, heavy with things left unsaid. Then, quieter than before, you said, "He's going through a rough time. Work issues. We might lose his apartment." I looked at you, letting the news sink in. You were telling me this because... Why? Did you expect sympathy? Pity? I managed a mirthless smile. "That's too bad. Life's tough sometimes." The sarcasm in my tone was blatant. You winced. "I know you're angry. But maybe this is what we both needed. A chance to start over separately. I just want you to know I never wanted to hurt you." I stared at my coffee cup, swirling the liquid. "And yet you did." You started to reach for my hand, but I pulled away instinctively. I saw the flash of hurt in your eyes, but I didn't feel sorry. Eventually, we finished our coffees in strained silence. Then you stood. "I guess this is goodbye," you said. I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. A part of me wanted to gather you in my arms, to remember what once was. But that part had no place anymore. This is how it ends, I thought. You turned and walked away, heels clicking on the tile floor, pulling your coat tighter around you as you stepped back out into the rain. I sat there, letting a wave of complex emotions wash over me. Relief, anger, sorrow, a faint whisper of nostalgia. But overshadowing it all was a sense of finality. You chose your path, and I'd chosen mine. In the days that followed, news reached my ears that Alan's agency had collapsed under the weight of a canceled partnership. He was forced to lay off staff, scramble for freelance gigs, even consider relocating to another city. And you, apparently, were dealing with the fallout, helping him financially, perhaps, or simply providing moral support. Once or twice, I thought about the irony, about how easily it could have been avoided if he kept his hands off another man's wife. But I didn't dwell on it too long. My focus was on rebuilding my own life. The divorce was finalized without much drama, given that neither of us contested the terms. We had no children, no major property battles, just the leftover scraps of a failed marriage. When I signed the last document at the attorney's office, I whispered under my breath, "Thank you for everything." A bitter echo of the gratitude I'd begun to feel. Because in a twisted way, the heartbreak had become my crucible, purging weaknesses, forging resilience. I continued my quiet ritual. Each night, before bed, I'd whisper, "Thank you for everything," as if acknowledging that the pain, the anger, the betrayal had a right to exist. It was a way of making peace with the scars. I didn't text you anymore. I didn't call. I didn't even check your social media. I let you and Alan Rice become ghosts of my past. Meanwhile, I tried new things. I started cooking for myself, experimenting with different cuisines. I took a few weekends to travel, driving out to tranquil lakes in the Midwest, just to clear my head. At work, I threw myself into projects, focusing on my clients' financial well-being. My colleagues noticed the shift. Some commented that I seemed more driven, more assertive. I realized I'd awakened a part of myself that refused to be complacent. Still, in quiet moments, late at night, or during a random commercial break on TV, the memories would creep in. The day I discovered your affair, the funeral scene where you publicly declared your love for another man. Sometimes my chest would tighten so much I had to close my eyes and breathe slowly to steady myself. But I no longer felt helpless. That part of me was gone. One day, I decided to hold a small gathering at my new place. Just a few friends I'd reconnected with over the months. I planned a simple meal, bought some decent wine. We gathered around my modest living room, sitting on mismatched furniture, laughing about old jokes. At some point in the evening, my phone buzzed with a text. I glanced at the screen. It was from you. Just a single line. "I hope you're doing okay." I stared at it for a long moment, then quietly deleted it. I didn't reply. After my friends left and I cleaned up the empty wine bottles and plates, I sat on the couch, feeling a sense of calm wash over me. I am okay, I realized. More than okay. I'd survived the worst betrayal I could imagine. The heartbreak, the humiliation, none of it destroyed me. Instead, it toughened me, showed me who I truly was. And for that, I was oddly grateful. The next day, I picked up those photographs from my friend's studio, shots of me in that beaten leather jacket, smiling with a glint of fierce independence in my eyes. I chose one to frame, placed it on a shelf in my new living room. It wasn't vanity. It was a reminder of a pivotal moment in my life, a testament that the old David Carter had died in the flames of betrayal, and a stronger version emerged from the ashes. A week later, I caught a rumor through the grapevine. Alan Rice had left town. Some said he took a job in another state. Others speculated he was bankrupt. I didn't care which was true. The point was, he was gone from my orbit. And with him went the last reminders of your infidelity. My anger was replaced by a calm acceptance. I'd exacted my revenge in a way that seemed almost polite on the surface, but it left no doubt. The man who wronged me was paying a heavy price, and so were you, for hitching your future to his unraveling career. I never confronted you with my role in his downfall. There was no need. I could imagine how you might piece it together eventually. The coincidence of my financial connections, and the well-timed rumors. Maybe you'd chalk it up to bad luck. Maybe you'd suspect I pulled some strings. Either way, I felt no compulsion to confirm or deny. My vengeance was done, and it tasted surprisingly sweet, like the final line of a tragic poem, wrapped in quiet inevitability. By the time the leaves turned gold and red, swirling around the Chicago streets, I found a strange contentment settling into my bones. My nights of pacing the floor, reliving the affair in my head, were replaced by a renewed sense of purpose. I found myself volunteering at a local mentorship program, offering financial literacy workshops to struggling families, and for the first time in a long time, I felt a genuine sense of fulfillment. I wasn't doing it to impress anyone or to patch a broken marriage. I was doing it for me. Months later, I was invited to a holiday party at a colleague's house. Standing around the living room, sipping a spiced punch, making small talk, I felt my phone vibrate. I stepped aside, checked the screen. It was a voicemail from you. I debated ignoring it, but curiosity got the better of me. Slipping into a quiet hallway, I pressed play. "Hi, David." Your voice began, tentative. "It's Laura Carter. I just want to say I understand if you never want to speak to me again. But I need you to know, there were moments in our marriage that were real. I'm sorry I hurt you. I'm alone now. And You paused, voice cracking. "I just hope someday you can forgive me. And if not, I understand." Silence. Then the voicemail ended. I stood there, phone in hand, staring at the darkness outside the window. I felt a swirl of emotions, nostalgia, sadness, pity, maybe a flicker of empathy. But forgiveness, that was more complicated. "You're alone now." The words echoed in my mind. So am I, in a sense. But I realized I no longer felt that emptiness, that sense of loss. I'd found my footing. Meanwhile, you had lost your illusion of happiness with Alan Reyes. I took a breath. Then I deleted the voicemail, because whatever words you had to say, it didn't matter. I'd carried my grief, my anger, my heartbreak. I'd been hollowed out by betrayal, but I survived. I grew. And in that growth, I no longer needed your apologies or your regrets. They were part of a life I'd buried. Stepping back into the party, I joined a conversation about holiday plans, forcing a polite smile. I listened, nodded, laughed at the appropriate moments. But inside, I felt this incredible lightness, as though I'd finally shed a heavy coat I'd been wearing for far too long. That night, back in my quiet apartment, I sank onto the couch. In the gentle hum of the heating vent, I heard my own voice say those now familiar words. "Thank you for everything." It wasn't a prayer or a mantra. It was a statement of fact. Thank you for the betrayal that forced me to recognize my worth. Thank you for driving me so far to the edge that I had no choice but to come back stronger. Some might call it a bitter sort of gratitude, but I didn't mind. Bitter or not, I'd claimed my power. And that power was mine alone. I lay there, drifting into sleep, the city lights flickering through my blinds. My final thought was a promise I made to myself. Never again. Never again would I allow someone else's lies to dictate my sense of self. Never again would I let betrayal consume me without a fight. The cost had been high, but the lesson was invaluable. And in that calm darkness, I felt a warmth behind my eyes. Tears, maybe. Tears not of sorrow, but of closure. I closed them, letting the heaviness of the day melt away. The only sound was my slow, steady breathing, accompanied by the gentle hum of the fridge in the kitchen. With that final breath, I understood that my life was now fully mine. You had destroyed me in one sense, but in doing so, you'd given birth to a part of me that wouldn't be tamed. And that was the most satisfying revenge of all. I slept deeply that night, free from the nightmares of funeral chapels and whispered phone calls, free from the ache of not knowing what you were doing behind my back, free from you, Laura Carter. And when morning came, I woke with clarity. I would continue on, forging a future defined by my own choices, my own strength. You had taken so much, but you also set me free. In that final reckoning, I realized I'd won a victory that went beyond any heartbreak or betrayal. I'd found my truest self, standing tall in the aftermath of the storm.